Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Abigail Flowers and I'm a jazz vocalist and Lanakai ukuleles artist living in Nashville, Tennessee. In today's video, we're going to get a little more into music theory and continue talking about chord spelling. In my last video, I talked about the names of musical notes and how we can work to find them on our ukulele. If we know the notes that belong in a chord, we can use our understanding of half steps to find those notes on each string and discover chord shapes. So to recap that process, we first need to know the notes that belong in a chord. Then we check each of our open strings to see which ones already belong. Then we examine the strings that don't belong and find the nearest note that fits our chord. Lastly, we have to check that all our notes are represented in the chord and that we're not leaving any important notes out. You may have already noticed a big problem here. The very first thing we need to know is which notes belong in a particular chord, but we haven't talked about that at all yet, so that's what we'll cover today. Because this area of study can get really complex and we could go down a very long rabbit hole, today we're just going to focus on major triads. That means major chords that consist of 3 notes. At the end of this video, we'll touch on minor triads. Major triads are usually called by a single letter name. For example, when we say a G chord, it's implied that we mean a G major triad. The first thing that I need to point out is that music theory is a little bit different than music practice. For example, I just told you that a G major chord consists of 3 notes, and those notes are G, B, and D. But if you play ukulele like I do, you know that we're using 4 strings. If we only have 3 notes and 4 strings, that means one of the notes is being doubled or played on 2 different strings. That might seem totally obvious to you, or it might seem super confusing, but just go into this lesson knowing that there are small differences when we move from talking about music theory to putting that into practice. A great example of that is when we list the notes in a chord, like G major for example, we say G, B, D. But when we play the chord on ukulele or guitar or even on piano, we're not always playing the notes in that order. When I play a G major on baritone ukulele, I'm playing D, G, B, G. So the order might not seem correct, but the important part is that all the notes I'm playing fit into that list of notes of G, B, and D. Let's get into the heart of today's lesson, which is how to know which notes belong in a major triad. Every major triad consists of 3 notes: the root, the third, and the fifth. The root note gives us the name of the chord. So in a G major triad, G is our root note. This is another important distinction. There is a note called G, and there is a chord called G. The chord called G contains the note called G, but they're not exactly the same thing. The third of the chord is found a major third above the root, and the fifth of the chord is found a perfect fifth above the root. But what does major third and perfect fifth even mean? These are both intervals. And an interval is the distance between 2 notes. Let's start with the major third. A major third is an interval where the 2 notes are 4 half steps apart. Let's go back to the stepladder image from my last video. If I want to find out which note is a major third above C, I have to start with C and then move up 4 rungs on the ladder. So C sharp is 1 rung, D is the second, D sharp is the third, and then E is the 4th. E is the note that is a major third above C. Let's do a couple more of these. Which note is a major third above G? To find it, you have to start with G and then climb up 4 rungs on the ladder. G sharp is 1, A is 2, A sharp is 3, and B is the 4th. So B is the note that is a major third above G. One more. Which note is a major third above B flat? This one gets a little tricky because we're going to hit the top of the ladder and have to start back over at the bottom. So you start with B flat, B is the first rung, and then we have to go back down to the bottom and C is our second rung. C sharp is the third, and D is the fourth. So D is the note that is a major third above B flat. Side note, you can also ask which note is a major third below another note. So what note is a major third below A? You would just count down 4 rungs until you get to F. The bottom line is a major third is a distance of 4 half steps. I apologize in advance because you're going to hear me talk about this for the next 4 weeks or so, but I was nominated for a local award for Best Jazz Vocalist, and I would appreciate it so much if you would take a minute to go vote for me. Voting is open now, and you don't have to be a Nashville resident to participate. The link to vote is nimadigital.com/vote. Thank you guys so much. Now let's look at the perfect fifth. I know it sounds really weird to refer to some intervals as major and some intervals as perfect, but it's a little quirk of music theory that I think has to do with the harmonic series, so we're not going to get too far into that. Don't stress about it. The main idea here is that a perfect fifth is an interval of 7 half steps. So if our starting note is C, and we want to find the note that is a perfect fifth above C, we would need to count 7 rungs on the ladder. So pause this video and give it a try. Okay, I'm about to give the answer. Did you land on G? G is a perfect fifth above C. So you start on C, climb up 7 rungs, and you should land on G. Let's try one more. Which note is a perfect fifth above G? Again, this one will be tricky because you'll reach the top of the ladder and have to start back at the bottom. If you don't like the ladder image, you can also check out the keyboard image or the pitch wheel image that I used in my last video. So one way to think of a major triad is a chord that has a root note, a note that is a major third above the root, and a note that is a perfect fifth above the root. Another way to think about the fifth of a chord is that it lives 3 half steps above the major third. Let's go back to the example of a C major chord. We start with our root of C, and then we count up 4 half steps to find our major third, which is E. We could find the fifth of our chord by counting 7 half steps up from C, or we could find it by counting 3 half steps up from the major third, which is E. So if we're starting on E, F is 1 rung or 1 half step, F sharp is the second, and G is the third. So the fifth in a C major chord is G. A C major chord is made up of C, E, and G. And both things are true. G lives 7 half steps above C, and it lives 3 half steps above E. You can use whichever method works best for your brain. In this way of thinking, we could say that a major triad is a major third plus a minor third. C to E is a major third or 4 half steps, and E to G is a minor third or 3 half steps. There's another way to think of major chords if you know major scales. If you know the major scale, then a major chord is what happens when you combine the first, third, and fifth scale degrees. For example, the A major scale is A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and then it starts over at A again. If you put together the first, third, and fifth notes in that list, it's A, C sharp, and E, which are the notes in an A major triad. So now let's look at some more examples to practice. We've already talked about 2 chords, G major and C major. G major is made up of G, B, and D, and C major is made up of C, E, and G. I would go ahead and write those down somewhere and just start making a list of all the major triads you know. You can add to this list every time you practice, and the more you know, the easier it will be to figure out or remember which notes belong in each major triad. First, let's find the notes in an F major triad. Remember, the root is where we get the name of the chord, so the root of an F major chord is the note F. So we're already a third of the way there. Next, we'll look for the major third. So start with F and then count up 4 half steps. And the note we land on is A. A is our second note. And last, we need to find the fifth of our chord. You can either count 7 half steps up from F or 3 half steps up from A. Either way, the answer is C. So the F major chord is spelled F-A-C. Now I want to point out a potential shortcut here. We already knew that the notes in a G major chord were G, B, and D. F is found 2 half steps below G, yes? Each note in an F major triad lives 2 half steps below the equivalent note in a G major triad. We typically call a distance of 2 half steps a whole step. So F is a whole step below G. So our root, F, is a whole step below G. Our third, A, is a whole step below B. And our fifth, C, is a whole step below D. So using this logic, can you figure out the notes in a G flat major triad? They'll all be found 1 half step below the corresponding note in a G major triad. I'll leave you with a few homework problems here. Let me know in the comments when you think you've got it figured out. And of course, if you're interested in setting up a one-on-one lesson, you can email me at contact@abigailflowersmusic.com or visit me at patreon.com/abigailflowersmusic. Homework question number 1. What are the notes in a D major triad? Question number 2. What are the notes in an A flat major triad? And question number 3, what are the notes in an F sharp major triad? Okay, lastly, I want to leave you with a few words about minor triads. Minor triads are also 3-note chords, but the difference between a major triad and a minor triad is this. In a major triad, the third of the chord is major, and in a minor triad, the third of the chord is minor. The fifth of the chord does not change from major to minor. So a C major chord is made up of C, E, and G. To make a C minor chord, the root and the fifth stay the same. The only change is that the third of the chord will be a half step lower at E flat instead of E. So what notes do you think are in a G minor chord? Let me know in the comments when you figured it out. That's all for today. I hope that was useful, and I'll see you on Saturday for Jazz Brunch. These are both intervals. Intervals! Remember, the root I want glasses. Where are my glasses? I want to wear